atmosphere is changing now, for the Spirit of the Lord is here. The evidence is all around that the Spirit of the Lord is here. The atmosphere is changing now, for the Spirit of the Lord is here. The evidence is all around that the Spirit of the Lord is here. Overflow in this place. Fill our hearts with your love. Your love surrounds us. You're the reason we came to encounter your love. Your love surrounds us. L'atmosfera cambiando sta, tuo spirito sta qui, e sei vivente tu muove, tuo spirito sta qui. L'atmosfera cambiando sta, tuo spirito sta qui, sei vivente tu muove, tuo spirito sta qui. Llena este lugar derramando tu amor me envuelve. evidence is all around that the Spirit of the Lord is here.
Hi, Makers.
Hi, Makers.
Well, we just wanted to pop in and say hi. And
We miss you guys. A lot has changed in the last few months.
yeah, we
A lot
got
has changed since March.
a lot. We got married and
Got a dog,
and
moved to Michigan,
and we're pregnant.
and we're pregnant.
So a lot is changing this year, but we miss you guys.
We miss you guys.
Hope all is well. Stay safe
And healthy.
and healthy.
We're gonna redo this.
No.
Yeah.
Say hi, Pepper. Oh.
Good morning, Makers Church. My name is Oscar Garcia. I'm the youth director here, and I'm also a Spanish speaker. I love mentioning that whenever I get a chance. ¿Cómo estamos el día de hoy? Muy buenos días. Es un privilegio estar aquí con ustedes otra vez. If you are like me, you love summer, but you can only handle it for so long. I love winter. I love fall. I can't handle 75-degree weather. It's too hot for me. So, Lord knows I can't handle 80 or 90. So, I'm extremely excited for the fall and for all the cold weather that's going to be happening. And I know what you're thinking. Oscar, you live in San Diego. You don't live in Texas. You don't live in Arizona. You don't know what cold is. You don't know what heat is. I understand that, but I'm just excited. And that being said, I'm also excited for a new series that's coming up next week. Kicking off our fall series, Cannot Be Shaken. With everything going on in this world and things feeling unsure, we are excited and we want to talk about where true foundation lies. This series is about those foundational elements of our faith, our church, and in our lives that cannot be shaken. So join us next week. That being said, you do not have to wait until next week to connect with Makers Church, because you can do it right now by texting Makers at 97000. There's community groups happening all week. There's men's groups, there's dad groups, there's mom groups, there's girl groups, there's youth groups, there's all this stuff going on. Once again, just text Makers at 97000. And also directly after the message, after this gathering, we are going to have communion via Zoom. You should have got a message this morning if you have texted Makers at 97000. But if you have not, feel free to just check the Makers website out. And lastly, for all of you who are connecting with us, we just want to say thank you. We cannot express how grateful we are during this time for all the love and support you have given us, for all the reposts you have done, for all the sharing of, Makers podcasts and Makers YouTube and Makers music that we've been doing. We're very, very thankful. Also, just a huge thank you to anybody giving to Makers Church. When you give to Makers Church, you're not only helping us run the church, but you're also directly giving to our impact partners and other communities, organizations that we help. We cannot and would not be able to do this without you. I'm extremely excited, which I say all the time, but I really am, to hear this next message by Pastor Mark. Hermano, I love this man. He's a great guy, and I know he has something, and the Lord will use him in incredible and mighty ways. So thank you for listening, and I hope you guys have a beautiful, wonderful Labor Day weekend. Thank you. Stay safe. Wash your hands. Put a mask on. And muchas gracias. Nos vemos.
Good morning, Makers Church. My name is Mark. I'm one of the pastors here, and I just want to say welcome. It's so good to be with you, to worship together, and sincerely hope and pray that you're doing well in this crazy season of ups and downs and highs and lows. I know for me, there are moments and days where I feel so productive and inspired and engaged and connected, and other days where like putting on a pair of pants feels like a win. You check it off in the win column. And it's just a strange time to be alive. And I love the Lamentation scripture where it says, because of God's great faithful love and devotion towards us, we are not consumed, even when there's chaos around, because God's mercies are new every morning. And for me, where it feels like Groundhog Day sometimes, where every morning is identical, it's nice to know that God's mercies are fresh and new, and there's something to be discovered and explored every single morning if we have ears to hear it and eyes to see it, and if we posture ourselves to receive that mercy that God desperately wants to give to us. So I want to pray that over us today and remind us as we go into this message. And by the way, happy Labor Day. I hope you're enjoying this weekend and that it's restoring and restful. I wonder if you can remember and imagine someone in your life who inspired you to more and who expanded your idea of what is possible, or made you feel bigger about yourself, made you feel confident, made you think that there was something more and there was purpose to your life. I know for me, there's a man that comes immediately to mind. His name was Floyd Kennedy Jr., and he was my one and only drum teacher. You see, when I was young, my father passed away, and he was a musician, and my mom had to sell most of his gear and his instruments for money. And later in life, she had saved one guitar that we kept in the attic. And my brother, when he was about 13, discovered it on accident. And he came down, and it was like buried treasure. He's like, what is this thing? This is incredible. And so he started learning guitar, and me, who was 3 years younger, all I wanted to do was be in a rock band with him. And so my mom, God bless her soul, got me a drum kit and let me play drums, which is insane because it was super loud and annoying, and she's a saint for letting me do it. And it came fairly naturally to me, but I was also just pretty terrible because you're a beginner. And after about a year or two, she's like, all right, I love that you're passionate about this drums. I can tell you care about it. Let's get you some lessons so you're not quite as horrible as you are now. And so she found this man named Floyd Kennedy, who went to a church called St. Paul's Baptist in Sacramento, which is where I grew up. And he was the drummer and the musical director. And this was known as one of the best gospel, soul, funk worship churches in the entire city. And Floyd Kennedy was a legend. And I don't know how she weaseled me in there, but she got me to take lessons with Floyd for 2 years. And I was so nervous when I first met him. He looked like a mix between Michael Strahan and Questlove, and he had the voice of James Earl Jones, and he was this commanding figure with this huge laugh and arms that were as big as my waist, and he just had this kind soul, though, as well. And when I first began to take lessons with him, there were so many things he taught me. First, just about music, and eventually about life. He became more of a friend and a mentor and a coach to me. But I never forgot some of those music lessons he taught me that I think are so applicable to all of us. They're not just limited to music. I think the concepts and the ideas are essential and anchoring to us as humans. And I want to walk through 4 lessons from Floyd that I learned that I think are going to be inspiring and life-giving to us in this season. So I'm calling this talk, I'm calling it Beats, Boundaries, and Rest Notes, Life Lessons from Floyd Kennedy Jr., Gospel Drummer Extraordinaire. As you can tell, I'm terrible at naming things, but we're going to stick with that for now. The first lesson that Floyd taught me was this idea that you need to break bad habits so that you can create space to build firmer foundations. You see, I came into Floyd, I've been playing drums for about a year and a half, completely self-taught at that point. So I had no idea what I was doing. I would just watch bands or watch friends, and I was crafting my own technique, and it was pretty horrendous. And you see, it worked at the time. It got me to that certain place, but I hit a ceiling. And I could no longer progress beyond that. And so Floyd was telling me, no, you're holding your drumstick all wrong. Your footwork is terrible. You're all shoulders. You got no arms. Everything is just, it's a mess. And so he began one by one to call out and make me aware of these unhelpful habits and begin to help me break them down. And that's such a difficult process because at first I didn't want to change the way I was doing it. It was so much harder to go backwards, it felt like. Like if I had come in as a blank slate, it would have been easier, but I had to unlearn things. And when I began to relearn better techniques, I felt worse. I felt like I was taking 2 steps backwards and just 1 forward. And I think in our own lives, sometimes when we become aware of the way that we deal with stress or anxiety, or the way we see ourselves or the world, or the way we interact with people who disagree with us, or who challenge us, or who critique us, or just stressors in life. Maybe it's habits we picked up from our parents or from our family, or things we saw in our culture or our neighborhood, or things we saw from our heroes on media. It could be from anywhere, but we developed these tools and these coping mechanisms that maybe they serve a purpose for a certain season in life, but eventually they become a ceiling on us, and they limit our capacity. And Floyd was like, if you want to become a more excellent drummer, if you want to have faster movement on the hi-hats, if you want to have smoother movement on that kick drum, if you want to have a tighter pocket and sit in that groove, you're going to have to unlearn a lot. And I think, man, how many times God is trying to call those things out in our life. Sometimes he uses other people, and that can be so frustrating, right? I don't want someone else to call something out in my life that maybe needs to be matured or grown or put away with so that I can have a firmer foundation and a better path forward. But that is the process that Jesus is calling us into. Transformation is not easy. It will cost us. But it is essential for us to have lives abundant, lives of deep meaning. And I think about the way Scripture declares it here in Romans 12, where it says this. It says, "Do not conform to the customs and patterns of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think and live. Then you will learn to know God's will for you, which is good and pleasing and perfect." The second lesson I remember from Floyd that he used to always tell me, he would say, "Who are you listening to?" And he always encouraged me to listen to the legends. And at first I'm like, what are you talking about? Listen to the legends. And he's like, hey, if you want to become an exceptional drummer, you need to be listening to other people who are exceptional. Find people that you respect, that you trust, that you want to emulate, mentors in your life. Listen to them. He's like, listen to Buddy Rich and Max Roach and Dennis Chambers and John Bonham and Dave Grohl and find all these different drummers and begin to study them. And I think that question is so important to ask. It's something that Pastor Sam Dula asked our church a few weeks ago of who are you listening to? I mean, for me, ultimately, it's Jesus. But I think it's important to have human mentors as well, people that can speak into your life, that you give permission to correct, to guide, to give guidance and wisdom. And who are the voices that you should not be giving any credence to? Voices that are distracting from the truth or from the heart of God. Who are these things and these people and places that you're letting speak into your life? And it reminds me of this scripture in Philippians where it says, "Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if it has any excellence or if it is praiseworthy in any way, think on such things." Because what we begin to think about, what we give permission to speak into our lives, what we dwell on, will shape us. Find and pursue things that breathe life into you, that challenge you in a good way, that speak peace over you. Around this idea that I've been challenged with in this season specifically, and one is prayer. Prayer has always been important to me in my life, and I've always seen the necessity of it. But I will admit, sometimes when I'm stressed or burdened, prayer may not be my first reaction, or at least not deep prayer when I sit in it. Maybe I'll throw up a quick thought, and that's okay. But are you having moments where you are diving deep into prayer? Or I wonder, are we spending more time posting than we are praying? Because you see, prayer can help God speak into our life. It allows us to begin to hear his voice and have that conversation and that relationship where God can begin to transform our priorities. There's so much noise in the world around us, so many things calling for our attention, so many things saying you should prioritize this or prioritize that, and it can become so confusing and it becomes overwhelming, and what happens is we begin to withdraw and retract and become numb and say, I don't even know what the decision is to move forward. But God's saying, start by remembering to have a conversation with me. To pray is like breathing, to inhale and exhale the Spirit. Thirdly, Floyd taught me all about boundaries and about the power of limitations, about the ability to say no, and how sometimes less could actually lead to more. You see, when I first entered Floyd's studio, I was in awe. I came in and he had this incredible drum kit. It had pretty much every drum I'd ever seen in my life all in one kit. It had 2 kick drums, like 12 toms, every single cymbal imaginable. His cymbals had little cymbals on top of them, little baby cymbals. It had chimes, shakers. I didn't even know half of the instruments he had connected to his kit. And I was like, oh man, I can't wait to play that thing. Do I get to jump on it? He's like, no, that's not for you. And I look into the corner, and there's this little drum kit for babies that was basically just a kick drum, a snare, and a hi-hat. 3 things compared to 30. And he's like, that's what you're going to start on. And I was like, no, this you don't understand. This kit's smaller than what I have at home. This is half the size. He's like, I know. You need to start with the basics. We're going to cut back. We're going to strip away so that you can learn to focus. And you can learn to grow and mature in just these small areas, because this thing's distracting to you. There's too many possibilities. It's going to cause you to stall out. You see, because as a young drummer, all I wanted to do was just play massive solos and play everything. He's like, no. What is the point of a drummer? I don't know, to do epic solos? It's like, no, the point of a drummer is to be the heartbeat of the band. They're the bedrock, the foundation. And we need to strip away the bad habits and also strip away the distractions so that you can first focus on that. And you see, I think boundaries is something that many of us struggle with, especially right now. If you're working from home, it's so hard to turn off work and to engage with your family or to have rest or actual authentic restoration in our lives. It's so easy to get distracted by the massive menu of content all around us, or to get sucked into the endless news feeds and streams that are literally engineered to be as addictive as possible, to keep us scrolling and clicking, and we begin to find ourselves in this prison that we can't get out of. And once again, it's all this information that numbs us. You see, I've been reading a lot about this idea of information overload, which is not a new word, but it is an actual documented scientific phenomenon that we're experiencing more and more as a culture. You see, we were not designed, our hearts and our heads and our souls were not designed to consume so much stimulus in our lives. We can only handle so many headlines and news articles and tragedies and images on our feed. And it works both ways. We become desensitized to the bad and to the good, to the broken and the beautiful. I told my wife I was scrolling through a friend's feed on Instagram, and they had these gorgeous nature shots. And I looked at it for about a half a second. I'm like, all right, double tap, move on. But you know what? I know if I keep scrolling, I'm going to see something just like it in 10 more seconds. And our brains were not designed to just have these little nibbles of consumption and to move on. And it causes us to feel this numbness and this low-level buzz of anxiety that never really goes away. And boundaries, limiting things, can be one of those incredible ways to free ourselves from that and to move into places of health. And that requires power, and it requires intention, it requires self-control. It reminds me of the scripture in 2 Timothy where it says just that. For God has not given us a spirit of fear or of timidity, but of power, love, and self-control. Man, we don't want to talk about self-control, but again, it's so essential to having healthy boundaries, which are so necessary for us to have lives where we are not burning out and feeling overwhelmed. And maybe you're not sure, like, I'm feeling tired. Am I experiencing unhealthy boundaries or burnout? Well, let me just read some of these things. If these sound true to you, perhaps you are wrestling with unhealthy boundaries in your life. Is stress and anxiety the default emotion that you are experiencing? Are you feeling like you're spinning your wheels in multiple arenas and feeling stuck in a rut? Are you feeling easily angered, even at small things? You're having a hard time building momentum and it doesn't seem like you're making progress in any areas. Or you're having a difficult time making decisions. That's a quick little side note pro tip. If there's anything you can make a decision on in your life this week, do that. Sometimes indecision is so stressful and weighing, and just making a decision, even if it's not the perfect decision and moving on, will do wonders for you. Are your empathy levels feeling low, and your compassion feeling depleted, and your passion feeling empty? Are you constantly feeling the need to distract yourself because you're unable to daydream, unable to be alone with your thoughts, unable to get bored because immediately you begin to feel tension? It's difficult to pray or to meditate or just be. Are you having a hard time resting or taking a break or a vacation or saying no to someone or something without feeling guilty or anxious? Are you in a constant state of FOMO, which is a little bit easier now that we're COVID time, but still we feel it? Are we finding ourselves trying to control the behavior of others? where we find ourselves being controlled by others, either through guilt or manipulation? Or are we constantly wanting just to run away from everything and just leave it all behind and throw in the towel and to give up? I know I've had seasons like that in my life, if I'm being honest. If you are experiencing any of those things, perhaps what we need is healthier boundaries that include rest and restoration. Boundaries can be difficult because we want to say yes to everything. Either because we want to participate in everything that sounds awesome, or we feel the pressure from external sources to be at everything, to be on that Zoom call, to be a part of that, to say yes to those things. And I think there is power and beauty in saying yes. But we have to understand that every time we say yes to one thing, we're actually saying no to 1,000 others. Because we are finite beings. Our time and our energy and our focus is limited. And I think of this quote from Steve Jobs. If you don't know Steve Jobs, just pull out your phone. It's probably an Apple, which he was the co-founder and former CEO of before he passed. And iconic, legendary. He started this company, Apple, and after a few years, he was actually kicked out of it. And it began to fail and flounder without his leadership. And then in the mid-90s, they brought him back in, and he took this company that was beginning to diminish, and he grew it and expanded it into be the largest, wealthiest tech company in the world. And when he says this, he says, people think that focus means saying yes to the thing you've got to focus on. But that's not what it means at all. It means saying no to 100 other good ideas out there. You have to pick carefully. Now listen to this. He said, I'm actually as proud of the things we haven't done as I am of the things we have done. Innovation is saying no to 1,000 things. Wow. He's as proud of the things he chose not to pursue or do as he is of the things that he did and that he accomplished. You see, when Steve Jobs retook over the reins of Apple in the mid-90s, they had hundreds of products on their assembly line, most of which were very mediocre. And what he did as CEO, one of the first things was begin to cut away all these different offerings. And people were saying, no, you can't get rid of that. You can't dismantle that. We've worked so hard towards that. And he whittled it down from several hundred all the way down to about 10 different products. And said, no, we're not going to make 100 decent products. We're going to make 10 exceptional products that are going to change the way people live their life. And that focus, that ability to have self-control, to say no to these things so he can say the yes to something better, is what transformed Apple. And we must be able to apply that same principle in our lives. And I wonder, in this season, are there things that God is calling you to say no to or to let go of so that you can focus your energy and your time on something better? Maybe it's just setting boundaries that are better for your work-home balance. I mean, my wife and I, we've become very good at saying, hey, work starts here and it ends at this time. And at this time, we put the computers away, we plug our phones in a different room, we're done for the day. It's been so good. We've scheduled out lunches. We do this thing called time blocking. It's very sexy. It's where you pull out a calendar and you just say, this is booked away for just lunch, or this is booked for a walk. It's very exciting. It's calendaring, basically. But it's so crucial to allowing us to say, oh, I know these emails are flooding in, but we've already dedicated this time to go for a walk together and to connect and to not think about the burdens of life upon us. There will be time for that. But for now, this is more important. I think of this quote from Dr. Henry Cloud, who, speaking about boundaries, says, where you lack maturity, implement structure. If we were just perfectly mature people, we would never have issues with feeling burnt out. But he's saying, no, if you're unable to choose in the moment that which is better, calendar it out. Have a mentor help you with it. Have an accountability partner do this with you. Where you lack maturity, implement structure. Anyone who's successful in any endeavor, as an artist, an innovator, entrepreneur, an athlete, applies this same principle. You start focused. One of my good friends, Michael, he goes to our church and he's a phenomenal BMX rider. If you've ever seen him on Instagram, he does insane things. He's jumping on 30-foot jumps and doing flips, and I don't even know how to describe all the tricks he's doing. I'm in awe watching him. And if I can get like a little 3-inch hop on my bike, I feel like I'm a rock star. And this guy is incredible. But Michael, just like any one of us, started off on training wheels and had to progress from there. And when he's training, he's focused. He says no to all these invitations. He actually will put his phone away for most of the day so that he can focus on writing because he has a goal that he's trying to achieve. And you see, that's where boundaries become the most effective, when we have a goal that we're trying to pursue. And the goal can be, how can I be the most exceptional husband in this season? How can I parent well? How can I just help my family make it through today? It can be small goals, but having that goal allows you to know what to say yes to. What I find so fascinating about this idea of boundaries is Jesus implemented this as well. He was so focused on what he came to do. You see, Jesus ultimately didn't come to be a teacher or a preacher or even a healer. Those were all beautiful things he did, but that wasn't his purpose. He says in scriptures, I came to be a ransom for many. I came to set captives free. Jesus came ultimately to do two things. The first was to live and to die and to rise again, conquering sin and death and shame so that we could have relationship with God and that we could move into a place of abundance and life and have connection with the divine and with each other. And secondly, he came to grow and to develop and to empower and unleash this ragtag group of people that he called the disciples. His inner 3, and then 12, and the 70, these people that when he would leave this earth, he would hand over the keys of the kingdom and say, continue on my work. Again, as I've been going through the Gospel of Mark and this personal Bible study, it's fascinating to me how many times it says that Jesus would teach the crowds in these strange parables, but then behind closed doors would tell his disciples everything in plain language. Or how he would heal someone and say, don't tell anyone. I don't want word to get out. You know, he was so focused on what he actually came to do. He didn't want to be distracted by these things. And there's even this strange passage in Mark where there's a Gentile woman, a woman who was not Jewish, from outside the land of Israel, who wanted Jesus to heal her daughter. And Jesus says to you, woman, I came specifically first to the people of Israel. He said, I'm focused on the people of Israel. He heals the daughter anyway, but I always thought, man, that seems so strange, and it almost rubbed me the wrong way. Why would God be so focused on just this small group? Because I wonder if God was waiting to hand over that next step of the kingdom to us, his people. You see, although Jesus himself didn't travel out of Israel, when he ascended into heaven, he told his followers, I want you to go to all of Israel and all the surrounding lands and to the ends of the earth, proclaiming and living out life, proclaiming God's goodness, teaching them about forgiveness and the way of Jesus. You see, he wanted to pass on that torch. And I wonder if his staying focused on his task at hand and his mission allowed him to create a yes for his disciples. He was allowed to delegate and to pass on the torch and therefore multiply his impact by not feeling the burden to do everything himself. He didn't try to do everything on his own. He knew what was going to be the best, most effective strategy in bringing about God's kingdom of goodness was to create space and opportunity for his followers to carry on the mission. And it required him to be excellent about saying no to things that were distractions so he could say yes to that which was most important. And we are called to do the same thing in our lives. The last life lesson I learned from Floyd Kennedy was the importance of rest notes. See, if you know anything about music, you'll understand that there are two main kinds of notes. There are your normal standard notes where it tells you to play this sound or hit this thing or hit that string at this time. And then there are these other symbols called rest notes where it tells you to not play, for you to hold off, to restrain, and to have silence. Because you see, music is all about this interplay and this interaction between sound and silence. You cannot have rhythm without silence. Otherwise, it's just a single long, annoying note. It's a combination of those two things, sound and silence, activity and rest, that produces rhythm. And rhythm is all around us. We see it in nature. We see it in the seasons. We see it in the way that the galaxies and the planets move. We see it in our cells. We see it in the way our heart beats and our lungs breathe. It's how God designed the cosmos, and we too were created to live in healthy rhythm. But when we become out of step with that, when we no longer see the necessity and the importance and the worship of rest, we become so busy with doing and achieving and consuming, it's when we become disheartened and distracted and numb like we talked about earlier. And so Floyd was teaching me, I know as a young drummer, he said, I know you want to just play these massive drum solos and you want to be so busy and you want to play super fast and loud. He's like, but to be that backbone, that foundation for the band, to create that groove, you need to have that healthy balance between sound and silence. You need to learn to play the rest notes. I think most of us nowadays understand the value of rest and things like sleep. How our neuroplasticity and our cognitive functions are all related to sleep. If we don't get enough sleep, terrible things happen. Scientists still don't quite know why we need to sleep. It's a mystery, but we know if you don't, your bodily functions begin to shut down, your decision-making, your mood, your stress are all negatively impacted. We need to sleep. And so it's interesting how God designed it in that way. And you look, if you want to go back to the very beginning of how it all began, in this beautiful poem of God creating the heavens and the earth and life and everything that moves and breathes, it describes this. It says, by the seventh day, God had finished the work that he had been doing. So on the seventh day, he rested from all of his work. Then God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it he rested from all the work of creating that he had done. The word holy, Kodesh, it means mysterious beauty. We can't even quite understand why, but we sense that there's something special and majestic and divine about this idea of rest. And I love this quote from Bob Goff, who says, rest is holy, go get some. And I've always used that analogy that sometimes the most holy thing we can do is take a nap. I'm reminded of this story of, in the Old Testament, there's this prophet Elijah, who's basically like a superhero, if you read the scriptures. He's doing miracles, he's calling out truth to power, he's shaking up the whole nation of Israel, and he has one of his most pinnacle moments in his life. It's a literal mountaintop experience. He's on this mountain and he defeats all these enemies, these enemy prophets, and after that event, he comes down and he's depressed and exhausted and he's complaining to God. He says, no one else cares about the things I care about. No one else cares about your compassion or your justice for the world. It's just me. And he feels so burnt out. And God in that moment doesn't try to encourage him, doesn't try to explain to him why he needs to just tough it up or suck it up. He doesn't try to change his perspective. What God actually does is he puts him to sleep for a day. And then when Elijah wakes up, he sends these ravens to bring food. And there's a stream that appears, and Elijah eats and he drinks and he falls back asleep again. So I think one of the most spiritual things we can also do is eat a sandwich. Go get some Wendy's, get a snack. That's good. But it's after he is physically restored and has that moment of rest that then God takes him to this other mountaintop where God communes with him. And it's where Elijah hears in a small whisper the voice of God. And God reminds him, hey, you're not alone. There's actually 7,000 other people in this country who still follow me, who still care about loving their neighbors and loving God. Don't be disheartened. You're not alone. But he needed to rest and take a break before could he experience what God was speaking to him. And I wonder how often in our own lives God is speaking to us. He is declaring goodness over us, but we're too tired to hear it. God is doing a miracle in our midst, but we're too exhausted to even notice. And what we need to do is take a nap. So following on what God tells us in Genesis about rest and the importance of rest, I think it's interesting to talk about that seventh day, which the scriptures call the Sabbath. It was this day that was set aside specifically to honor and observe rest and to withhold from work. But it wasn't just any kind of work. We sometimes just think, it just meant you couldn't do anything on that day. In the Hebrew mind then and now, there were two forms of work. There were two different words to define it. There was the word avodah and malakah. And avodah was work that was basic, simple, menial task. It was picking up something and moving it from place A to place B. It was sweeping a floor. It was doing this activity. But malakah was this creative type of work. It was writing something down. It was creating a piece of art. It was composing music. It was crafting a meal. It was starting a fire. It was anything that was created was malakah. And that was the type of work that you were not allowed to do on the Sabbath, because that was the creative work that God did in Genesis. And it's saying that is the type of work that you need to withhold from. And the main reason for that is because a creative act was not considered complete until you had taken a moment to observe it, to experience it, to engage with it, to savor it. A meal wasn't done until someone sat down and enjoyed it and ate it. A piece of music was not considered complete until somebody heard it and was moved by it. A home was not done until someone could travel into it and have a shelter for them. You see, in Genesis, God was resting on that seventh day because it was necessary to complete the creative act of the first 6 days. On that seventh day, he observed all he had done and saw that it was good, and he enjoyed it. He reveled in it. He savored it. And you see, it's an essential thing for us to do as well. We don't often stop to look at what we have accomplished. We just move on to the next task, move on to the next chore. We never even take a moment to look back about what has happened in our lives, to reflect, to enjoy, to savor. It says it like this too in Exodus, the retelling of Genesis, where it says, "So the children of Israel are meant to observe the Sabbath, to celebrate the Sabbath through all their generations as a perpetual covenant." What he's saying is, you observing this rest is going to show that you are following and worshiping me as your God. And it will be a sign between God and the Israelites forever. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, and on the seventh day he rested and was refreshed. Do you see that? On the seventh day God rested and was refreshed. That's fascinating. You see, I've heard from many people over the years that he didn't need to rest. God doesn't get tired. He just rested so that he could give us an example and model it for us. He didn't need to do it. But that's not actually what Scripture says. It says that when he rested, God himself was refreshed. The Hebrew word nafash, it means to breathe in, to notice, to observe, to wonder, to take pleasure in. God himself got something out of the act of resting. We don't just rest because we're weak. Resting isn't some product of sin or the fall or brokenness. We were designed to rest because we were created in the image of God, and God himself rests and is refreshed. So we too reflect the image of God when we participate in the divine, worshipful, holy act of resting. You see, when I was younger, I was taught, man, you just need to always be doing and be producing, and if you need to stop and take a break, it's almost a sign of weakness. But that is how you burn out, and it's also a disgrace and a disobedience to what God calls us to. And I love this quote from Maya Angelou, who says, "Every person needs to take one day away, a day in which we consciously separate the past from the present and from the future, where jobs, family, employers, and friends can exist one day without any of us. And if our egos permit us to confess, they could exist eternally in our absence. Each person deserves a day away in which no problems are confronted, no solutions searched for. Each of us needs to withdraw from the cares from which will not withdraw from us." It's a great quote. So if we know and understand that rest is maybe important and essential, why is it so difficult to do? I think one is, as I mentioned earlier, rest can reveal those bad habits and those unhealthy things in our own life, and it's discomforting to see those. And so when we start to rest, it's almost like we have withdrawals from being busy and being active and being distracted. We don't like being alone with our own thoughts, and we start becoming anxious. Will everything get done? We worry, will everything get accomplished that's on our plate? And we have to almost detox and decompress. And sometimes we don't rest out of fear that we won't have enough, because we have goals of financial gain or achieving this or that, and if we take a moment to rest, we're not going to get that. But you see, rest, when we do participate in it, is an opportunity to trust God who says, "I will provide." The God who says, "Don't worry about tomorrow. There's plenty enough tomorrow to worry about." Take joy and peace in today because God provides. Sabbath is a fulfillment of that trust. It's putting feet to it. It's putting it in practice. Saying, "God, I believe you are who you say you are. I believe you say you will provide. And so I'm going to take a moment to not worry about the cares of the past or the future and just dwell and to savor in the goodness around me. And then there are some of us who don't rest because we were trained not to, the way we were raised by our families or our cultures or even our churches. We celebrate the people who, man, look at them. They're always busy taking care of people. They're always doing something. And it creates this unhealthy martyr syndrome. And perhaps our focus begins to become on our own self and how we are perceived. And we're more busy with activities so that we can be seen as someone who's caring, but not someone who's actually receiving from others or receiving from God, this reciprocal love that produces a healthy rhythm in our life that's sustainable. Because there's plenty of work for us to do. There is justice to fight for. There is equality to bring about. There are people who need to learn that there is a God who desperately loves them, and that they are not alone, and that there are those around us who want to live in healthy community. And that requires energy. It's the marathon, not the sprint. And if all we ever do is activity and hurry and frenzy, we will burn out, or we will lose our passion and we will tap out. And God says, no, I have more for you than that. So as I begin to close, I want to remind us again of the lessons for life that we can learn from a drummer. The importance of breaking bad habits and forming firmer foundations. About being intentional about what we are taking in, who we are listening to, who we are pursuing. About creating healthy boundaries in our life. About having that Spirit of God that gives us power and love and self-control so that we can focus on what is truly important. And also so that we can develop this healthy, sustainable rhythm in our life. The same exact rhythm that God participates in. True, authentic rest is so countercultural. It's so revolutionary and subversive. In our world that's full of competition and scarcity, where we're fueled by fear and greed and a desire for more, that will consume us if we do not conquer it through the name and power of Jesus. Because Jesus is the Lord of Sabbath. He is our true rest, and that he will set us free from the inability to stop and be still. And it reminds me of the words of Jesus where he says this to us. He says, you who are tired, if you're worn out, if you're burned out on religion, come to me. Get away with me and you will recover your life. I will show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn from the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me, and you will learn to live freely and lightly. Come to me, all you who are weary, and I will give you rest. God, I pray that you remind us of your goodness. May you, the Lord of Sabbath, bring that about in our lives today and into this weekend. God, it's only through your power and through your Holy Spirit that we can rest in your embrace and in your goodness and in your love. Amen.
God, I'm on my knees again. God, I'm begging, please again. I need you. Oh, I need you. Walking down the desert roads, water for my thirsty soul. I need you. Oh, I need you. Your forgiveness, it's like sweet, sweet honey on my lips. It's like the sound of symphony to my ears. It's like holy water on my skin.
I wanna know about being born again.
the riverside. Take me under, baptize. I need you. Oh God, I need you. Your forgiveness is like sweet, sweet honey on my lips, like the sound of a symphony to my ears. It's like holy water on my skin.
I don't wanna abuse your grace. God, I need it every day. It's the only thing that ever really makes me wanna change. I don't wanna abuse your grace. God, I need it every day. It's the only thing that ever really makes me wanna change.
I don't wanna abuse your grace. God, I need it every day. It's the only thing that ever really makes me wanna change. I don't wanna abuse your grace. God, I need it every day. It's the only thing that ever really makes me wanna change. Your forgiveness is like sweet, sweet honey on my lips, like the sound of symphony to my ears. It's like holy water on my skin. It's like sweet